Okay, good morning and welcome back to another week of Tehillim. We're starting today a new one, Mem Tes, number 49 in Tehillim. We're getting close to the first, I guess we'll call it the end of the first quarter of Tehillim over here, which would be number 50. Shlomo Melech tells us, we've spoken about this verse many times over the years, Toiv laleches lebeis avel mi beis hamishte, it is better for a person to go to a house of mourning than to a beis hamishte, to a house of celebration. Ki chayiten elivo, because a person who is alive and goes to the house of mourning, they will take the messages that they see in that place to heart, and it will make a difference in their life. You go to a chasana, you go to a wedding, you drink, you dance, you celebrate, you jump up and down, you're happy, you're joyous. It's an amazing feeling and you're elevated when you leave. But how many messages of the true meaning of life did a person walk away with after that night? Masha'enken, on the other hand, when we go to the Beis Avil, to the house of mourning, where we see the finality of life, we see the people that are mourning the loss of somebody that was there, we recognize that we're not going to live on forever, and therefore life, in fact, is not a party. So a person then will be able to take the positions in their life, or they take the reins of, so to speak, of their direction, and make sure that they're doing things in the right way, so that when someone is sitting in their house of mourning over them after 120 years, they have only the most wonderful and outstanding things to say about the way that this person used their lifetime in this world. If that's the case, then it must be that whatever we would learn at the house of mourning is something very intrinsic into our mission here in this world. And therefore it is not a coincidence, it is very well planned that the particular Tehillim that is said extra in a house of mourning when a person goes to a Shiva house, for a davening, for a shachris, for a mariv, or mincha. So there's an extra Tehillim that is said at the end of the davening. And that's Tehillim Mem Tes. That's number 49, which we are about to learn today. And the question is, as we're going to find out, but the question is, what is so unique about this particular Tehillim? There's 150 Tehillim in the book of Psalms. 150. The sages, when they were putting together what a Shiva house could look like, they could have chosen any one of the Psalms of Dovid HaMelech that would have fit the bill for why it is that this is what has to be. What we have to learn out, what we want to understand. And yet of all 150, number 49 is the one that they chose. So what is the message in Tehillim number 49 that our sages want us to understand is so intrinsic in the house of mourning, but really a much more global message that we have to learn. So just before we begin the Tehillim, as we're going to see that a lot of what is written over here is going to be dealing with the struggles of money and the struggles of the world, the material world around a person. And this is the last in the Psalms of Bnei Korach, the last of the Tehillim that the sons of Korach wrote in the numerous ones that we have spoken about before. And the reason that they leave off with this message is because they understood that their father Korach, who ended up waging a battle against Moshe Rabbeinu, which itself was unheard of, and anyone in their right mind would never ever do such a thing. You don't fight against Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshiach, the savior of all of Klal Yisrael. We see now in these parshas the birth and the emergence of Moshe as the leader. There was nobody in the world like a Moshe Rabbeinu. But Korach, in his unquenchable thirst for money and for possessions, his desire to be someone that was recognized as great here in this world, is what brought about his downfall, that he was willing and wanted to fight against the greatest man of the generation and perhaps of all time. And therefore they leave off with this message. As we're going to see in our Mefarshim today, they leave off with this message that it's not about one's glory here in this world. It's not about one's monetary might in this world, as we're going to see, life is much more meaningful than that. And as we embark upon this, let's keep in mind that this is a message, as it says over here, that Shimu Zais Kol Ha'amim Azinu Kol Yoshvei Choled. This is a message not just to Klal Yisrael. Many of the Tehillim are to the Jewish people, because we're the only ones that will listen. But this is a message that is reverberating for all generations to every single human being in the world. And that is, you must know what your priorities are. You must know what life is really all about, for if not, whether you are a man, woman, or a child, whether you are a Jew or a non-Jew alike, a person's life is going to end up like Korach over here. It's going to end up going down into the wrong place. So let's open up right now with the words of Rav Hirsch, who explains the outline of this Tehillim, and then we'll go deeper into the commentaries to see what they have to say. So again, Lamnatseich Livnei Korach Mizmor, the first pasuk over here says, this is the one that Hashem grants victory to the sons of Korach, and says Rav Hirsch the following idea. The theme of this Tehillim is the relationship of man's material possessions to his moral and spiritual task in life. And this we're going to see is probably the greatest struggle that has endured throughout all of generations. On one hand, I live in a world that is physical. I live in a world where there are desirous things all around me. There's cars and there's jewelry and there are homes and there's remodeling and refurbishing and vacations and going here and going there and restaurants that cost 5 times the amount of money that it costs to feed your family at home on a Monday or Tuesday night is what it would cost you to go to a restaurant and be able to feed them on a Tuesday night instead. So there's many, many things in this world. There's coffee that costs $6.99 for a cup, where you can take your little your what do you call it, your instant coffee over there, put it in, and for 99 cents at most, you have yourself a cup of coffee. Says Rav Hirsch, the entire Tehillim is going to focus around the basic premise, and that is how do we put our moral and our spiritual mission and task in life into play, into regards when it comes to the physical material world that we are living in. And he says, only if a person is going to fulfill their task during their stay on earth by employing all of the physical and material resources as a means to this end, that man can then rescue his spiritual existence so that it will reach beyond the fleeting span of earth and enter into immortality when his body dies. Meaning, maybe, do you mind close that door over there? Yeah? Thank you so much. Thank you very much. Basically meaning, Rav Hirsch in English is telling us the following: that if you learn how to put together your existence in the physical world versus the more important task, which is becoming a spiritual being, if you understand that the world over here is transient and is fleeting, and therefore whatever you gain for yourself physically, you're not going to take it with you. Although that I mentioned for many years already the famous story that I saw in an Israeli newspaper years and years ago, until 7 years ago. I was learning in yeshiva, and there was a newspaper at the time, it was called the Jerusalem Post, I believe. And once in a while the yeshiva would get us the Jerusalem Post just so we could feel connected to the world. And they had a story in there about a man who loved his Corvette so much that his last dying wish was that he should be buried in his Corvette. So sure enough, to acquiesce this man and his desires, they dug a grave large enough to crane in his Corvette with his body inside the Corvette instead of a coffin. Says Rav Hirsch, that's not what life is all about. Life is all about a person being in the physical world because that's where we are, but yet recognizing that your neshama is going to live on after this world. And the more that your neshama, that your soul is going to be connected to this world, the more difficult it will be to shed the physicality of this world and transfer and transition into a life of Ruchnious, a life of spirituality that is eternal after here. The neshama that must leave the body is either going to go smooth, or the neshama that's going to leave the body is going to have a painful time getting out of our body with immerse itself here in this world. And therefore, says Rav Hirsch, if however a person fails to recognize his true purpose in life, and he should regard his acquisitions of material wealth as an end in and of itself, and he makes that his main goal here on earth, then he's going to forfeit immortality both here below and in heaven above. And his existence will not continue beyond the grave. Meaning, I could use Olam Hazeh. I could use this world that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has placed me in. I could use the money that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given me to be Mekadesh, to consecrate the world around me. I could use it to give tzedakah. I could use it to build families. I could use it to help people live a better life. I could use my money to pay tuition. I could use my money to send children off to Jewish school. I could use my money to help support the shul. I could do so many, many things with my money. I could use my money to make a delicious Shabbos meal, which is Baruch Hashem within my means to be able to provide my family with such things. I can use it to buy nice clothing for Yom Tov, not extravagant that I'm going to attract attention to myself, but nice, honorable clothing for Shabbos and for Yom Tov. A few pairs of shoes as well to go along with that outfit. Nothing wrong with that. But when I begin to use money for the sake of money itself, because I desire the pleasures of the physical world, not because it's going to elevate or consecrate or sanctify the world around me, but rather because I'll be able to indulge in those desires that I have deeper inside of the animalistic recesses that are inside of me, says Rav Hirsch, you are forfeiting your life in this world, and all the more so you are forfeiting your life in the world to come. Because this world is a world of action in which we take the world at face value, and we try to engage ourselves as much as we can in asiyas ha-mitzvos, in the performance of mitzvahs, striving for spirituality. HaKadosh Baruch Hu has made it challenging, where He has hidden the spiritual realm within the physical, for us to work even harder to pull out the nuggets of Ruchnious, of spirituality that is in everything of this world. If we get lost and drawn after the physical elements and components of this world, and we just do for the sake of enjoying that which is here in this world, or indulging in that which is here in this world, so then a person is going to lose the connection with Ruchnious, with spirituality, and then when they have to make decisions of what is right and wrong, it will always be the physical elements in their mind that are going to lead them into those decisions. They're going to lose out on the sensitivity to spirituality. It will not govern their thoughts, nor their actions, nor their practices. And then, says Rav Hirsch, you are giving up the world of immortality, of nitzchius, of what we call eternal life in this world and the world to come for sure. And a person will go down to the grave, and in the grave they will stay. Their neshama will not have a chance to be able to ascend the higher heights and go to where HaKadosh Baruch Hu really wants it to go. The Alter of Nevarduk, who is one of the masters of Precious, of separating himself from the physical world, all for the sake of Ruchni, of spirituality, it bothered him immensely when he would see other people indulging in the physical existence that was around them. In the yeshiva of Nevarduk, there was a rule The rule was you were allowed to get new clothing. However, when you would get new clothing, you were not allowed to be the first person to wear it. Before you were allowed to wear your new Shabbos suit, you gave it to your friend and you let him wear out your suit a little bit. And then you would take it for yourself and then you would put it on. Why? So that it wouldn't feel so luxurious, it wouldn't feel so much splendor and glory when you would put it on for the first time. It didn't have that brand new feel that it normally would. Because the Alter wanted to teach his students that of course there's nothing wrong with a person looking honorable and put together and the like. Nevertheless, if a person is indulgent and indulging in those ideas, that itself will draw a person away then from the spiritual goals and aspirations and purpose of why HaKadosh Baruch Hu put us here into this world. And he says Rav Hirsch over here, that in this particular Tehillim, that the Bnei Korach, the sons of Korach, are calling upon all communities of men, as well upon all individuals, irrespective of class or of social position. They must take this truth to heart. Why? Because this is one basic truth which no one can afford to dismiss lightly. Meaning, as we mentioned in the very beginning, it does not matter who you are. It does not matter what your background is. It doesn't matter how much or how little money is in your bank account, or how much is tied up in stocks, or how much is coming in the Yerusha, in the inheritance. That is irrelevant, says Rav Hirsch. What is relevant is that every single person will struggle with this challenge in their life, no matter who they are, no matter what they are. Because we live physical beings, there's a neshama buried deep inside of us. Some of us are aware of that neshama, others are not so in tune with that neshama. And one of the reasons that we are not in tune with the neshama the way that we should be is because we are simply too much focused on the Gashmi, on the physicality and the materialism of life, and we do not spend enough time delving deeper underneath the surface into the spirit that is there. I once heard years ago from Rabbi Akiva Tatz. Rabbi Akiva Tatz used to be one of the big Rabbanim. He was one of the big draws in Or Sameach in Yerushalayim in Jerusalem. Many philosophical young men and women were drawn to his teachings. He said that one of the greatest pleasures that he had teaching in Or Sameach in a yeshiva for Balei Tshuva was to watch the transformation that the bachrim, that the boys would go through when they came into that yeshiva. He said often they would pick boys up off the walls of the kaisel. These were kids that were backpacking around. They were fit, they were young, they were energetic, they were athletic, they were tall, they were muscular, they were burly, long hair, you name it, they had it all. They'd come to the yeshiva, and for the first few days they didn't know what hit them when they got there. However, as time would go on and they would begin to get into the studies, the transformation would begin to take place. And the transition was they went from being these very physical-oriented young men. These were people whose bodies were their shrine. The whole life was Gashmi, was physicality, always focused on what they could get out of this world. Suddenly their whole life became this neshama, the spirit that was within them. And he said he would watch as the weeks turned into months, as the transformation would take place on their face. They came in, they were hard-edged, they were rough. You would look at them, there was an emptiness that was just on their face. As the time would go on and the neshama would come to life, the neshama would begin to permeate through their skin, through their eyes, through their forehead, through the way that they interacted with one another, their expressions and the like, and they became spiritual entities in the same body that was once only for the sake of Gashmi, for the sake of physical pleasure and delights. Says Rav Hirsch, everybody will struggle with this. Everybody look at the world around us and we will see we're living, it's like living in Greece from 2,000 years ago. The world is completely immersed in the physical. They are doing things, there are poster billboards that are going on the streets today. The valley already is tame compared to what is going on in the city of Los Angeles, California. There are billboards and there are posters that in 20 years ago you never would have dreamed in your wildest imagination would be permitted to be on public areas and public streets. Why? Because as the neshama, as the soul of the nation gets deeper and deeper into the exiles underneath the physicality of the body, so then the body rules supreme and makes decisions. This is okay and that is okay and there's nothing wrong with seeing this. And so what if your little 3-year-old kid who's walking on the way to go to school would have to see such an image in front of them like that? So what if when you're driving down the street with your kids and you're trying to keep your kids somewhat pure in this impure world, they have to be exposed one after the other to a billboard that is, says Rav Hirsch, everybody has to contend with this. And whoever doesn't see that is just simply not paying attention to the reality of life. So it says like this, Shimu Zois, listen to this. Kol ha'amim, we're in the second verse, all of the nations. Ha'azinu, bend your ear. Kol yoshvei chaled, all of those that are sitting in the chaled, we'll have to see this word chaled, it could mean a fleeting world, but it could mean something else as well that we are going to see. Says Rav Hirsch, in order for a person to truly evaluate the true worth of material wealth without overrating it, again, without overrating it, if Elon Musk is your hero of COVID because he somehow managed to make $200 billion throughout the entire thing, so then you are overrating what money is really all about. It's, of course, of importance. You can't live without money. You need to be able to put gas in your car. If the prices won't go up too much more, we'll still be able to pay those bills. You need to be able to put food on the table so you can nourish your body. That is, of course, true. You have education that you want to pay for. It costs money to do such things, and so on and so forth. But it is absolutely indispensable to the individual if he is to fulfill his purpose in life. Meaning, it cannot be the focus. The focus of life cannot be all the magazines that are sitting on our coffee tables, spending hours and hours and hours and hours getting absorbed, looking in for this one, for the kitchen table and for the backyard and for the patio and for the car and for the this and for the that. We cannot become absorbed in these things, because if we do, then we will not be able to fulfill our purpose here in this world. And therefore he writes over here an amazing idea. It says, Kol yoshvei chaled, which the simple explanation, which we would understand better, means that Kol yoshvei chaled means that we are the inhabitants of a fleeting world. However, chaled is also the language of rust. What does it mean over here, rust? Says Rav Hirsch, that the yoshvei chaled, the inhabitants of a world that is subject to the rust of decay. The entire physical world, in and through which their lives spring forth and develop, is constantly susceptible to the effect of decay. What is rust? Rust is when something gets old, when something is not taken care of very well. And even when you do take care of things to the best of your abilities, the nature of the physical world is things will eventually begin to rust and decay. It's not going to exist forever. The physical world itself that we are a part of is a rusty world. It's not fresh. It's not new. It's not the purpose. It's not the goal. It's not something that rejuvenates and revives itself like the spiritual realms are able to do. It is rusty and it is decaying. And therefore it is important for mortal man to understand that the true worth of the material goods which are his portion in the transitory world, meaning that our life in this world don't get sidetracked by the rust. Rather, make sure that you invest yourself in those things that are clean, that are new, that are smooth, that are vibrant. The things that are vibrant, that cannot get rusty, that cannot get dirty if you continue to cleanse yourself, are the spiritual goals that a person will set for themselves. HaKadosh Baruch Hu is mechadish b'maaseh bereishis b'chol yom tamid. Hashem renews the creation of the world constantly every single day. It would seem to be that it's talking about the physical world, and therefore there should be no room for rust. However, there is always room for rust, because HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, although that the physical world around us has the advent that HaKadosh Baruch Hu will continue to pump it with life and give it a force and give it a refreshing qualities if you tap into it on a daily basis, it really means on a deeper level that the potential for life that HaKadosh Baruch Hu created in the beginning of time, that itself is renewing itself constantly every single day. And if a person wants to tap in to the vibrancy of the Ribbono Shel Olam, a person wants to connect with the Kedusha of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, or the Kedusha of their Neshama, so then take advantage of the spiritual opportunities that HaKadosh Baruch Hu gives to us on a daily basis, constantly, always. And in that way, then, a person is going to be able to not become rusty like the Tin Man, but rather you will become always smooth and always clean and always ready to be able to embrace the blessing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is placing down here in this world to a person. And therefore, says Rav Hirsch, that you have a choice. You could be a rusty person, or you could be a clean person. If you engage too much in the physical, you will become rusty. You will not be able to get past that either. Sometimes, a person has certain tools that they leave lying around outside to the elements. And these tools worked great when they were born, nice and fresh and clean. And then you left them outside, and it got rainy, and it got cold, and it got hot, and it got sunny, and it got damp. And you didn't take care of this particular tool. And next thing you know, several months after it's been exposed to all the elements, you find it on the ground, and it's filled with rust. So you go buy one of these rust cleaners, and you do the best job that you can, but guess what? It's too late. The rust has gotten so entrenched into this tool that you have over here, it's not going to work anymore. You have pliers that simply can't open up the right way. You have a wrench that can't get its clutches around the bolt anymore. You have a lawnmower that's been sitting out the whole winter time, and now all of the engines and all of the nuts and bolts underneath, they're all rusted away. It's not going to work. Says Rav Hirsch, if in fact a person is going to just allow themselves to become rusty in this world, you get to a point where it's very, very difficult to get rid of the rust. So you have to keep yourself away from the rust. You have to keep yourself away from those things that create the decay, which is the physical world around us. And a person needs to immerse themselves as much as is possible into the world of Ruchnious, of spirituality, where they could avoid a lot of these things. Says Rashi over here, this particular psalm is written really in response to those people who are wealthy and they trust in their riches. It's written to all of the nations because everybody has to hear these words. Your money at the end of the day is not what is going to bring you success. Your riches at the end of your life is not what you are going to take with you. At the end of life, that's the famous story, I'm sure that I told it before. I believe that they just published the book now, Rav Moshe Reichman. Maybe the story is going to be in there, if it's really with him. It's one of the Reichman brothers, I believe it's him. When he passed away, he left at Tzava, he left a letter of his last will and testament to his children. And in the letter it said, there was one letter, and it said, read this after I die, and then at the other one, read the other one after my funeral. So the first letter said, please tell the Chevra Kedisha that I have a pair of socks that are very meaningful to me, and I would like to be buried in this particular pair of socks. So that's my last request of you, my children. So the children go to the Chevra Kedisha, to the organization that takes care of the dead and the deceased, and they say, our father didn't ask for much. He was a very wealthy man. He didn't ask for really much. He just said this particular pair of socks was very sentimental to him, and he asked if he could be buried in this pair of socks. And the Chevra Kedisha said, there's only the shrouds, only the burial shrouds is what we wear. They said, please, our father doesn't ask much. All he's asking is these pair of socks. Go ask the Rabbanim, go ask your shilas, whatever you need to do. Please, we'd like to fulfill our father's last dying word. So sure enough, they go around to the Rabbanim and they ask, and the answer is hands down no from every single one. He cannot be buried in a pair of socks. It's only the shrouds, that is the customary shrouds, burial shrouds. And the children felt terrible. Their father didn't ask much, and he did so much for them in his lifetime, and they weren't able to do it. They follow halacha. After the funeral is over, they come and they read the other letter. And the other letter says, my dear children, by now you realized that I could not be buried in my socks, because the only thing that a person will be buried in halachically is the burial shrouds. And the message is, my dear children, that with all of the money and all of the wealth that I amassed in this world, you don't take a penny with you until the grave. The only thing that you take with you to the grave are your maisim tovim, are your good deeds, are your tzedakah, are your charity, is the mitzvahs that you have done, the kedusha, the levels of Torah that you reached in your life. That's all that you will carry with you until the grave, and that is what is going to last on into the world to come. So take that message to heart, and don't get absorbed. He was concerned because with all the money that was going to fall to his children in the Yerusha, in the inheritance, he was concerned that they would begin to immerse themselves in the world of monetary greatness and bliss. He was telling them, just as I made millions and I didn't take a penny with me in this world, you take the money that you inherited, use it for the right things. Don't get entrenched and immersed, because that's not what life is really all about. Says the Rashi over here, the message over here is to every single person, as we said. It's a message that is telling us, don't get absorbed in the world of Gashmias physicality, because you cannot take it with you. The Metzudas Dovid says the same thing. Ki kulam tzrichim ladas hamusar hazeh. Everybody needs to understand these words of rebuke and teaching. Because if you don't, so then you end up with the world the way that we have it looking today. If the world itself would be a little bit more ruchni, a little bit more spiritual than it is today, the world would be able to understand then just what we could accomplish, what we could become in the spiritual levels that we are trying to achieve. Okay, let's go a little bit further over here. And the pasuk says, number 3, Gam b'nei Adam, ish yachad, asher ve'evyon. B'nei Adam, these are sons of man. Gam b'nei ish, these are sons of men. Yachad together, Asher ve'Evion, we put the rich and the poor together as one. So if Hirsch writes like this, why does it have to say B'nai Adam and B'nai Ish? Sons of Adam, of man, U'B'nai Ish, sons of men. See,
isn't Adam Adam?
Yeah.
Adam too, no?
Yeah, it could be Adam Arishon, it could be referring to him, yes. So he says like this. So he says that there are people who are B'nai Ish. B'nai Ish are people of prominence. They have what's called the yichus. They can trace their ancestry back to men of great distinction, who pride themselves and are respected not because of any merit on their own or their own achievements. Rather, they have like a pedigree of ancestry. So I personally myself, I might not have done anything so important or of great value. I might not have achieved anything major in my life, but look at the pictures on the wall behind me, and you'll see who I am. You see who my Zayda was, you see who my Babi was, you know my name is a famous name, you'll know all the great people that came before me. Some B'nai Ish. There's also people that are B'nai Adam. B'nai Adam are regular, run-of-the-mill people who don't have that same pedigree. They can't bring you all the documentation of the pure lineage that they have going back to Mount Sinai that never skipped a beat of Talmidei Chachamim and Tzaddikim and the like. The regular people, says Rav Hirsch over here. And the message is that the psalm is trying to give over is that it doesn't matter who you are. It doesn't matter how great your lineage stems from or how little you know about your lineage. It doesn't matter what you accomplished on your own or what it is that you have achieved because you were born into that family and therefore the nepotism works the way that it does. It means that every single person, no matter who they are, must make sure that for power and wealth are overrated and worshipped not only by those who possess them, but even more so the people that lack them. Meaning, if you are this B'nai Ish, people of prominence, you come from families, let's say over here he seems to be learning it of wealth, of distinction, of prominence and the like. So you might think, my money is great, my money will help me out and everything like that. First of all, for you, you should know, it's worthless, it's not going to get you to where you want to go. But there's also B'nai Adam, the more regular people, who don't have money at their disposal, who don't have everything that they want, who can't indulge in the luxuries of life. And for them, who are lacking that money, they will often look at what somebody else has and they'll longingly wish that they had what they have. They look and they say, maybe I could just have a little bit more. Come on, God, can't you make it a little bit better this month? Let me hit lotto, let me hit the jackpot. If only I have that money, then I'll be able to do so much more in my life. Those people, even all the more so, says Rav Hirsch, have to be very careful. Don't lose sight of what the importance or the relevance of money is in one's life. On the other hand, if a person is not endowed with great wealth, and they don't have that, they should actually have a level of gratitude to HaKadosh Baruch Hu that perhaps they don't have to struggle putting those two worlds together as one. I believe that it is brought down that Rav Chaim Kanievsky, if I'm not mistaken, who is one of the leading Gedolei Hador today, he, many years ago, after he's having his own children and then grandchildren were coming along, he was mispalel, he davened that his children and his grandchildren and his offspring, they should never know the nisayon, the challenge of having a lot of money. Because he understood that the challenges of having a lot of money are something that is not easy to maneuver one's way through. It is very easy and simple to get entrenched in the physical world, and then a person will lose sight of what we came into this world for, which is Ruchnious, which is spirituality, not Gashmias, not physicality and materialism. Says Rav Hirsch, if you're a B'nai Ish, you're a person who has the wealth behind them, maybe you earned it, maybe you inherited from somebody else. So you got to be on guard anyway, because you got too much of Gashmi and for sure it's going to pull you away from the world of Ruchni. But if you're a person who has more Ruchnious and less Gashmias, you should be grateful to Hashem. Because the less that you have, the more you are able to see what the meaning and the purpose and the intent of life is all about. I remember once traveling to England years and years ago for a chasana, and one of my Rebbeim, who was a massive, massive Talmid Chacham in Eretz Yisrael, he was one of the Dayanim, he was a judge on the Bezdin of Jerusalem. He was a person who came from a family of somewhat of means, and he went on to become this illustrious Torah scholar in Israel, and he basically lived a life of, I won't call it poverty, but he lived a life of simplicity. He had a large family, I remember it was 11, 12, 13 something children. They lived in a relatively small apartment in Jerusalem. He ate little, he slept little, he bought little, his clothing was always clean, always pressed, but nothing fancy at all. His kids, it was a house of simplicity, and we used to love going there often for Shabbos. When this wedding took place in England, there was a family that he had heard of who lived in England, who was a very, very wealthy family, but they were known throughout as tremendous Talmidei Chachamim and Bnei Torah, people that live lives of true Torah value. So before he went to the wedding, he asked the chassan, the groom, could he arrange that he could stay in that house? He wanted to see how it's possible that you could have money and you could have Torah at the same time. He didn't believe such a thing. He wanted to see with his own eyes. So he was put up at that house, and he told us afterwards, it could work. If your mind is focused and you have the right agenda and you have the right intentions by what you're doing, he said, I got to the door, the kids came and answered the door. It wasn't a butler. He said, kids came to the door and they schlepped my suitcases into my room, and the other kids or the mother, whatever, she gave him what to eat and she sat him down, and then the father came in and showed him his study, he said, which was the size of like a small yeshiva, and he said, you can take any book that you want, learn whatever you want, and he had books at his disposal that he was hard to come by. And he said he saw in this family there was a joy, there was a happiness they were exuding, and they were able to combine the physical and the spiritual world, because the spiritual is what was guiding them. And the physical was just to be used for them to be able to get there. Says Rav Hirsch, if you live a simple life, it's a bracha that a person should appreciate, because it will allow you to remain much more connected to the Ruchni and not the Gashmi. If you come from a world of Gashmi, Yibnei Ish, over here, says Rav Hirsch, so then you have to be on guard, because you have to be aware that maybe, perhaps, there's too much of the indulgence of Olam Hazeh, of this world that is taking place. Fine. Let's go to the next verse over here. Pi yedaber chachmais v'agus libi savunais. My mouth speaks chachmais, wisdom. V'agus libi savunais, and my heart, which meditates, it continues to think about things. Says the pasuk is tavunais, it gets deeper understandings, which means if you want to be able to clarify the real inherent struggle between the Ruchnious and the Gashmias, the spiritual and the physical, if you want to be able to understand how to grab hold of your life and do what is appropriate and correct in the eyes of Hashem, to know how to spend your money in the right way and how to spend your time wisely in the world of spiritual pursuits, so then it takes chachma, takes tremendous wisdom and tavuna and deeper understanding. Chachma, as we said many times, is the wisdom that a person amasses for themselves by gathering in the facts that are in front of them. And tavuna, bina, is the much deeper understanding that a person arrives at as they continue to plumb the depths of the wisdom, going deeper and deeper, pulling away the layers and layers that are there to understand what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants. And therefore, this struggle between money and soul, between physical and the spiritual is so deep that if you look at it on the surface level all of your life, you'll never really understand what the battle is what a person is fighting. It's only when you begin to amass the chachma, the wisdom of this world, which means you pull in all the facts, you begin to see, you start looking at people that are wealthy and you ask yourself, are they really happy? Do they really have everything that they want? Okay, I saw this person just got this and they got that and they got that and that. So do I see that their shalom biases, their peace and harmony is amazing? Do I see that? Do I see that their kids are the best kids on the block? Do I see? No, I don't see that. I don't see that Gashmias, that physicality, that wealth and all these things makes a person as happy as they claim to be. Then I look at that person over there, they live a simpler life. They have a simpler car. They have a simpler house. They go on simpler vacations. Their kids dress, whatever it is. But I see a certain happiness. I remember that when my father came to visit me in Yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael 27 years ago, and he was staying with me in the Yeshiva dormitory, and we would go to families for Shabbos. We'd go to them for meals, and for Yom Tov, he came Pesach time. We spent many, many meals with people. He couldn't get over the small apartments and the numerous children that were there and the peace and tranquility that reigned in almost every single house that we went into. He couldn't believe the honor that children were giving to their parents. He couldn't believe the harmony, the marital harmony between husbands and wives. With a little bit of food, everybody seemed to be happy. The singing and the joyousness that was taking place during those festivals, he couldn't get over it. And it was something that kept coming up over and over and over again. Look at that family, and look at that one, and look at that one. And that's the answer. Because when Ruchnious, spirituality, the deeper meanings of life are what is really your intention. The messages that we give over to our children are something that's going to fill them up with hope and joy and make them feel good about themselves on the inside. Not teach them to be running here and running there and wanting this and running that with impulsivity and trying to bring it into their lives. So then you end up with a house that is filled with joy and happiness and goodness. Rav, there was the beautiful book that was printed, that was the biography of Rabbi Jungreis. And there's a story in there that one Friday night, she had a woman that was a guest at her house, and Rabbi Jungreis is lighting the candles, the Shabbos candles, and as she's lighting it, she calls her little children over. And she says, I want you to daven right now for such and such a woman, Rachel Bas Leah. She's in the hospital right now. She has the machla. She's very sick and she needs a refuah shalema. And she said, you know who she is? She used to come to our house sometimes. She's been sick for a while. We have to daven that she have a refuah shalema. And so these little girls come next to her mother and they start davening together with mother, and the girls are crying that this woman should have a refuah shalema. And this other woman is standing there flabbergasted. What a chutzpah, you take your kids Friday night right before Shabbos comes in and you start making them cry like that over someone who is sick. So she says to Rebbe Jungreis afterwards, excuse me, Rebbetzin, she says, is that a good thing for your children? You make them feel so sad and you make them cry over a woman who is sick. It's Shabbos coming right now. It's supposed to be a happy day. Why don't you do happy things with them? So Rebbe Jungreis said to her, she said, children are going to cry no matter what. They might as well cry about the right things in life. Let my children learn how to cry for somebody else and not cry over their selfish things that they want for themselves. And that's what we're saying over here. We're saying it requires chachma, wisdom. It requires tevuna, bina, deeper understanding for a person to be able to understand what it is that HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us, how He wants us to use this world in the right way. If we will get that message, if we will understand it properly, then we will be able to conquer this challenge that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us of the physical versus the spiritual. And I'll just conclude over here with the words of the Malbim on this, and he writes, Hanefesh shi atzmus ha'adam neged haguf. The nefesh, the soul, is the essence of a person which goes negative, which goes against the body. Hatolada mizeh shetzarich sheyamir mechemde aguf bad oisha nefesh. The way in which you are going to allow the nefesh to be triumphant over the body is, you need to be yamir, you need to nullify the desires of the body in order that you can reach the happiness and the joy and the wealth, the spiritual wealth that you are trying to achieve. Vehekesh tevuniyeh hazeh b'nui al yesod lekuach midivrei hachachma. The way to get to that deeper understanding of the spiritual content that is inside of your nefesh is first, as we said, you have to take from the words of wisdom, mimohus hanefesh, from the essence of the soul, shi'atzmus ha'adam, which is the essence of man. The essence of a human being is not what we see in front of us. The essence of the human being is what's underneath us, which is the nefesh, is the soul. The only way to understand the pinings of the neshama, the complexities of the neshama that HaKadosh Baruch Hu has given us is, you must gather the wisdom that is at your accessible at your fingertips, learn about the neshama, and then on top of all of that, go deeper and deeper and deeper to understand the yearnings that are inside. Once that a person gets there, then they can be strong enough to combat the desires of the chemde haguf, the lusts and the desires and the pleasures of the physical body that a person has. If you do that, then you have spiritual bliss, joy, and satisfaction in your life in this world, and as we mentioned previously, ultimately in the world to come. So this is the battle of life, not just for the Jew, but for the non-Jew alike. Happens to be that Klal Yisrael is more fashioned to be able to appreciate the struggle that is internally. Our neshama is bigger, and therefore the neshama should be able to hear better. We should be able to hear better the yearnings of the neshama. But if you have a bigger neshama, that means Hashem has a much bigger task and a plan and a goal for us to achieve, and therefore we have to work extra hard to be able to clarify for ourselves the Ruchnious versus the Gashmias, the spiritual versus the physical, to understand the yearnings that are inside of our soul in order that we could, as the Malbim writes, we could reach the real atzmos, the real essence of who we are, which is the Oisher HaNefesh, when the soul itself rejoices over its great lot that it has here in this world and in the world to come. Be'ez Hashem. Okay, have a wonderful week. I'm not sure yet there's going to be class next week. I will make sure I send out a message to clarify. All the best.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome. You're welcome.